My name is Karen Lopez. I'm a student at UTT, Environmental Science and Management Master's Program. And this Sunday is the Ganesh Utsav, which is a Hindu ceremony involving the immersion of Ganesh murtis into various riverways and oceans, etc. And recently there have been a lot of stores advertising these eco-friendly Ganesh murtis. And this actually sparked my interest because obviously people are becoming a lot more environmentally aware these days and would put out a little bit extra money if it is that they believe that they are making a positive contribution towards the environment by purchasing these eco-friendly murtis. And I decided to do a very simple in-home experiment to determine whether these murtis are indeed first of all water soluble and what sort of contaminants they will introduce, if any, into the environment upon dissolving. So what I did was I purchased 3 murtis from various stores, and I will just perform a very simple experiment, just adding water and observing them. First of all, to see how long they will take to dissolve and the appearance of the water after they have dissolved. So now I'm just going to do a brief analysis, a visual analysis of each of the murtis and just comment on their general appearance. So I got this one in Dragonas. This guy actually makes the murtis and supplies them to several stores in the area. This one is actually quite heavy. It feels very sturdy. It's flaking a little bit, actually, right on top here. Kind of like a dusty sort of appearance. The paint itself is quite shiny. As you can see, the gold has a very metallic appearance, and it feels really like heavy and sturdy. So this is sample number 1. Sample number 2 I got from Premsing's in Kirap. This one feels lighter and it kind of feels hollow. It also has a very sort of powdery feel to it. In terms of the appearance, it doesn't look very shiny. There's no evidence of metallic paint being used for this one, but it does feel really dusty. So this is number 2 from Premsing's. Number 3 I got from a little store in Kirap. This one is hollowed out the bottom. It feels a little dusty on the inside. On the outside, you can once again see the paint has sort of a shiny metallic nature, right? This one is missing a hand due to transport issues. But from the inside, it's not really as powdery as the other 2 were, but it definitely feels a little sturdier, but even though it's hollow, and it has that shiny metallic appearance. So this is specimen number 3, and basically what I'll be doing is pouring water into each of them, just regular tap water, just to determine the solubility of each of them, and I will be looking at the appearance of the water afterwards to see what sort of residue is left back, either because of the paint or because of the material that they were made of. Okay, so now I'm going to just add the tap water into each of the bowls. But it's going to add enough for them to dissolve. So I'll be just adding them into the bowl like this. I'm not measuring the amount of water that I'm adding, but I will be topping up each of the bowls over the couple of days. And this is just to determine how easily they dissolve once they have been immersed into water. So I'll be monitoring them over the course of a few days, and I'll be providing pictures of the progress as each day goes by. Okay, so now what we're going to do is just look at some observations when we added each of the murtis immediately to water, just to kind of gauge what happens to them at time 0. So for specimen number 1, or murti number 1, we can see that it's pretty much the same. The base, which is dissolved in the water, has not begun to dissolve. No particles have started to fall off of it or anything. So it's very sturdy. Not much is going on over here. Murti number 2 has obviously begun to dissolve. The base appears to be quite soggy, and actually while I was adding the water, you saw a lot of bubbles beginning to come out from the side, and that indicates that it's quite porous. So if you remember, I said that it felt a lot lighter. So that makes sense. And there are also a lot more particles in the water, a lot of grayish clay-like material that seems to be falling off to the side. So that's murty number 2. Murty number 3, we're seeing some small bubbles starting to come out from the side, and a few particles have actually started to fall off from the base that are actually immersed in the water. However, it's not as great, so that is the rate of dissolution is not as significant as we have seen in murty number 2. However, there are signs that it is quite porous, and this also did feel quite hollow, but it was very sturdy. So this is just the initial observations. Over time, you will continue to add water to them and leave them basically unaltered, and just keep taking pictures every hour. Well, not every hour, but as time progresses, we will take pictures and begin to start comparing them to see which of them dissolves the fastest, and also we're looking at the quality of the water afterwards to see what additional contaminants, if any, these 3 are adding to the various waterways. Okay, so it's been 20 minutes since we started the experiment, so we're going to take a look at each of the murties and see how they're progressing in terms of how they're dissolving. So number 1, you can see not much has happened, so I'm just going to raise it up here, and you can see it's still very much intact. The water is clear. There's some very tiny particles at the base, and the water doesn't have any sort of oily appearance or anything. But the base is a little softer, but there's no real significance in terms of a deterioration of the quality due to the water. Murty number 2 has seemed to make the most progress, and is definitely dissolving the fastest. So let's pick it up. As you can see, most of the base is completely gone. The inside seems to have been made out of some sort of clay-like material, and the water, the paint itself is actually starting to come out of my hands a little bit. The water does have a slightly oily feel, and obviously you can't see the base of the basin because there are a lot of particles in it, right? So I'm actually going to just put this back in the water for it to continue to dissolve, so you can see how long they take. So I'm just going to put these to lie down. So they're now completely submerged, or mostly submerged. Murty number 3 has also gone through a lot of it also has dissolved quite a lot. So when I pick it up, the base falls off completely, and the particles, however, have remained mostly at the bottom, so it's not as dispersed as with murty number 2. I'm not sure if the lighting is picking this up, but you're actually seeing a very significant amount of sheen at the top of the water. So this seems to have been made with some sort of material that has been made with some sort of oil. So I'm going to put this back in. He seems to be winning the race in terms of how fast it's dissolving. I don't know if you can also pick this up, but there are also little pieces of, well, some sort of metallic paint flakes, it looks like, that's floating to the top. And you're actually seeing a very pronounced oily sheen, right? So this is just the progress after 20 minutes. Murty number 1, hardly any dissolving taking place. Murty number 2 was dissolving quite at a rapid rate, and the visibility is quite low in the water, and the paint is also dissolving very easily. Murty number 3 has dissolved quite a lot. However, we're seeing evidence of oil on the surface of the water, as well as metallic flakes of paint. So that is the progress as of 20 minutes, and we'll do another video shortly as the process is continuing. Okay, so approximately 30 minutes have passed since we began the experiment, so we're just going to take a look at the progress that each of the murties have made since then. So murty number 1, we see is still very much intact. Not a lot is going on. So the base has begun to dissolve, and we see it has a sort, it's like almost like dirt. However, it's still very much solid and has not really made a lot of progress. So I'm just going to put him back in there. Murti number 2 is completely dissolved, well, almost. The only thing that has remained is the face and the trunk. The sediment that has remained is a very silty, clay-like I don't know, mush that is left behind. So the surface of the water, you're seeing little tiny flakes of paint that have dissolved over time. However, this one has appeared to make a significant amount of progress since the half hour that we've started. Murti number 3 has also dissolved quite a lot, but is still very much intact. So it's difficult to pick it up without it falling apart, but the paint does not appear to be dissolving. There's a visible oily sheen at the top of the surface of the water, and there are tiny flakes of metallic paint also on the surface. In terms of this one it doesn't really feel like clay at all. It feels like it might have been mixed with something else. It's taking it, like the particles are much larger than with Murti number 2. So I guess further analysis will determine what that actually is, but it doesn't seem to be clay for the most part. It seems as if it's clay mixed with something else, and it also is taking a little longer than Murti number 2 to dissolve completely. So that is the progress as of 30 minutes. We'll continue to monitor them and make further observations as it progresses. Okay, so about 1 hour has elapsed since we actually started the experiment. So we're just going to take one last look at the progress of each of the murties just to see how they have progressed since we began. So Murti number 1, we can see that the surface has a sort of a yellowish color, and this is probably due to the paints that were used. If you look at the base, you see that the base is actually, the surface has, well, the paint that was originally on it has come off, which could have been contributing to the general color of the water. It appears to be made of some sort of dirt, but in terms of the overall murti itself, it's still very much intact. So not a lot of it has gone. So if this were to have been immersed into a river, then 1 hour after immersion, this almost entire statue would have still been present in the river. And we'll have to do further tests to see just how long this one takes. But this was the murti that was purchased in Chagones. So this is number 1. This appears to be paint dissolved, possibly from what was used to decorate the murti with. Murti number 2, which was from Crimsings in Kirap, is now completely dissolved. What is left behind is this very clay-like substance. It's very smooth, very silty. These bubbles would have been from the aeration whilst the murti was dissolving, which indicates that it was very porous. There is no evidence of paint or any significant oily sheen on the surface. Obviously the the visibility of the water has decreased significantly, but that is because we are using a very limited volume of water. So to see how this will react in an actual river will be interesting once you have currents and other turbulence occurring in the river. But for the most part, the murti is completely dissolved, and all that is left is the clay. There is no evidence of any residual paint or speckles of anything that was left over. Murti number 3, however, is still very much, well, it has dissolved for the most parts. There is a very prominent oily sheen. I'm not sure if the picture is picking up due to the lighting quality. However, the murti itself, the paint does not seem to be dissolving very readily, and we're still seeing specks of the metallic paint floating around. In terms of the sediments, I'm not entirely sure what this is. It seems to be clay mixed with something else, but it doesn't seem to be 100% clay. It has a very granular feel to it. The visibility is slightly less, but that could be that the sediment is dissolving dissolving faster. And also the paint doesn't seem to be readily dissolving. Like, I have to actually manually agitate it in order for it to dissolve. And as I was saying before, the water feels oily. You can feel as though there was some sort of product that contains oil that was used to decorate it, and that could introduce possible contaminants into the river water. So in conclusion, based on purely visual observation, we can see that, well, for murti number 1, it definitely has the slowest rate of dissolving. It appears to be made of dirt of some kind. However, it's taking a long time for it to actually go into the water. The water itself appeared to have a yellow color, and that could possibly be from the paint that was used to decorate it. However, it does affect the visibility of the water, and it could be possibly introducing certain contaminants into the river that is being immersed into. Murti number 2 took the least amount of time to dissolve. All that was left at the bottom was a very clay-like sediment. There was a very slight oily sheen, which may have resulted from the direct decorative paint that was used on it. However, for the most part, it appeared to have been water soluble because there were no specks of paint that was left over. Everything dissolved. The visibility of the water decreased, but that was due to the clay particles and the volume of water that was used. So that can be applied to murti number 1 as well. Remember, if they're being immersed into rivers, then there will be a current, so those particles will be washed along. However, it is taking a little while to settle, so that can be another possible impact. But for the most part, it dissolved the fastest, and there was no evidence of paint residue. Murti number 3 definitely had the most oil on the surface of the water, which would have come from the paint or the decoration that was used. The sediments that remained at the bottom appeared to be clay mixed with some other material that was used for it. Also, the visibility reduced as well, basically due to the particles that were left behind, and also there were big flakes of paint that were left over. The paint did not seem very readily dissolvable, so that could also have a potential impact on the river. So just based purely on visual observations, it would seem that as though murti number 2 was dissolved the fastest and appeared to have the least impact on the overall sedimentation of the water, that of whatever waterway would have been introduced into, based on the fact that there was the least artificial coloring that was contributed by it, and also less flecks of paint, or less specks of paint, sorry. So that was my observation based on a very simple at-home experiment. I hope it helps the consumers be a little bit wiser. Always remember to try to go towards clay murtis with water-soluble paints. Eventually it will have a less significant impact on the environment than those that use plaster of Paris or metallic paints or oil-based paints. So that's it for me, Karen Lopez, signing off.